What's worse than racism, or sexism, or ageism? Have you considered speciesism? Who made humans king or queen? We did? If you don't tolerate white supremacy, why would you tolerate a society's human supremacist way of thinking? PETA President Ingrid Newkirk explains why it's time to end speciesism. Next, on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. Here we talk to the key players at PETA and the movement and ask them about how animal rights change their lives and how they stay motivated to make the world a better place for the animals. On today's episode, PETA's president and founder, Ingrid Newkirk, on the fight to end speciesism.
The idea, not just that we shouldn't be cruel to animals in this way and that way, but the overriding idea that at its base there's something wrong with feeling superior to others, and that includes other animals, of which we are just one. We are all animals. We're all in this together, or we should be. And so, differentiating between us is not helpful. Finding the similarities and the sameness is what counts in life.
More with Ingrid Newkirk next on the PETA Podcast. But first, thanks again for joining us here at the PETA Podcast. Please share a link with friends. Let them know the animals have a voice on the PETA Podcast. And if you've just found us, welcome. And keep binging. There's lots to listen to on the PETA Podcast. Your questions on veganism, the latest on all the dead horses in America's horse racing industry. Hear all our frank conversations with PETA founder Ingrid Newkirk. It's all available 24/7 wherever you catch your podcasts. Now, if you really want to help the animals, you can always hit the Donate Now button at PETA.org. And if you're high-tech and have Amazon's Alexa, it's as easy as saying, Alexa, donate to PETA. And now to our episode. Late in August, Los Angeles was the scene for the march for the 5th World Day for the End of Speciesism. It's no joke. It's the next ethical jump for most people who say they're kind to animals, then meet with friends on the weekend to grill steaks and ribs. PETA President Ingrid Newkirk talked to me recently about the March to End Speciesism and how it's the necessary next step in the evolution of not just animal rights activists, but all human beings. Here's Ingrid on the PETA Podcast.
A day is just a day, and this fight is constant. We have to do it every day, and in my book, we have to do it all day. I did march in Los Angeles. I joined the March for the End of Speciesism. The crowd was in a great frame of mind. It was wonderful to see all the banners and the signs that called out the fact that people are often human supremacists. And I saw these wonderful marches in London and in New York, and so it's the idea, not just that we shouldn't be cruel to animals in this way and that way, but the overriding idea that at its base there's something wrong with feeling superior to others, and that includes other animals, of which we are just one. It's catching on, and it was really fantastic to see everybody wearing the T-shirts that says fight speciesism or end human supremacism, or we are all one, or they are us, or we're all in this together. It was really terrific because it obviously is resonating, especially with young people, but not just with young people.
I mean, if you're going to be cruelty-free, I guess the next question is, well, cruelty-free exactly to whom? Or to everyone? Or to some? Or are you going to be selective with your, cruelty-free approach? I mean, it seems that this really is bringing it to a new level where people have to understand, hey, maybe I haven't been as good as I thought. Maybe I have to be better.
I think that's exactly right. And we tend to have compartmentalized minds where we know that such and such is wrong, and then we haven't considered something that might be just as wrong, but involves a different shape or gender or color of a victim, or species in this case of a victim. So I think you saw the very kernel of it, the very start of it, with these banners that we had. There's one on our fence, I think, even today at the PETA headquarters in D.C. It says, if you wouldn't eat a dog, why would you eat a pig? And it juxtaposes the face of the pig and the dog on each other's bodies so that you can see, oh gosh, they've got eyes, they've got ears, they've got a nose, they're thinking, they're looking at you, they're sensitive. It doesn't make any sense. You can go to other countries and eating a dog is perfectly fine, and people from perhaps this culture go nuts about it and say, how dare you, how could you, you barbarians, when if you go to the slaughterhouse, it's the same. They're all struggling. None of them wishes to die. They can all smell it, and we don't need any of it. Don't need dog flesh, don't need giraffe milk, don't need anything.
But it really puts us on the spot. I mean, it says, when you start talking about speciesism, now suddenly it's not just, oh, I'm being kind, I'm not being cruel. Now it's being specific, and it's saying, hey, you have to be cruelty-free to all species, and then it starts to get into our mindset of, well, there's a hierarchy of equality where some are more equal than others, but maybe there's this flat line where everyone is equal and we're all on the same plane. I'm sure there are people who scratch their heads when they see the word speciesism and say, well, animal kingdom, I'm, the king of the kingdom, aren't I?
It's so right. We have to look at underlying principles. I think that's very important, and see what we're for and what we're against, and then look at the arbitrary factors that we use to limit how much we apply those values to our lives. What you said about people scratching their heads, I think, is spot on, because people do think, oh, how can you possibly equate me with, pick an animal? And I think, well, this is the same thing, that it wasn't that long ago in time that men used to think that women were just good for the kitchen and the bedroom, were too stupid to vote, could be beaten up, could be raped, because, who could possibly ever think that a woman had as many rights or the intellectual ability or anything else compared to a man? And then, of course, we've thought that about other races. We've thought it across the board. Children with disabilities used to be treated so appallingly. They were just the brunt of jokes. But yet, if you asked anybody, or almost anybody, who was making those jokes or deciding that women were just too dumb to have serious conversations with, they would have told you that they were kind, they were decent, they were compassionate, they had principles, they had values, they didn't like people to be unfairly treated. And yet, they had grown up being able to do those things and hadn't even thought it through. So I think we're seeing the same thing now, where we're saying, Roger Fouts called it the great orchestra of life, where you may play the piano and I may play the violin. We're all in this together. And as we're seeing the Amazon burning and we're seeing all these things happening, the ice floes melting and the seas rising, and it's because we have forgotten that we are one player in the great orchestra of life. And so we have abandoned our decency for greed and compulsion and convenience and all these things. And we need to return to that and think, Biology 101 taught us, I'm an animal. I have emotions, I have thoughts, I have interests, I want my freedom, I don't like pain, I fall in love. So, yeah, we should be all in this together. And animals should not be seen as accoutrements to human life, as amusements that, we can do with as we please with making them photo props or putting them on a bicycle in the circus or testing our cosmetics on them or whatever we do. They are us. And this move to have speciesism end, to challenge human supremacism, really brings us back to that point of what are our principles? Are we decent or are we not? And how are we making these arbitrary choices?
Well, it seems like it really does bring this whole anti-cruelty thing to a much broader view, this idea, it brings us almost on the same level as people would see racism or genderism or misogyny. It elevates this concept of animal rights up to the same level as fighting racism and fighting genderism and that sort of thing, no? Or fighting sexism.
Oh, absolutely. And fighting ageism and xenophobia and all these things are just based on prejudice. And I think if you ask people would say, oh, no, I'm definitely against prejudice. And yet you think, well, then hang on a minute. What about the chicken who's been ground up for your chicken salad sandwich today? Wasn't it just prejudice that made you think, oh, they don't count? Oh, we can actually torture them in the factory farm, the store, and so on. So, very much so are we saying expand the circle of your understanding. It used to be just expand the circle of your compassion. And now it's be consistent. Think this through. Isn't it just prejudice that allows you to drag your dog down the sidewalk when he's enjoying sniffing something? Or, as you say, buying a Canada Goose jacket that has a coyote collar when you just decide, oh, yeah, that's for me. No, it's not for you. That's not a what, it's a who. And you didn't have any rights to interfere with their lives. Leave them alone.
Yeah, I mentioned racism. I'm Asian American, Filipino American, and I was at a vegan restaurant in Seattle this week, and there was a sign they called them the invisible vegans, and it was about African American vegans. And inside this restaurant, there were African Americans with whites and very diverse. But this idea of racism is part of this anti-cruelty thing. Cruelty thing is some people, they say they don't see it. They don't see the jump. They don't make the jump. What do you say to those people who see it all as separate and its own little box, and it's not like eating. If I want to eat a hamburger, I can. If I want to eat a pork rib, I can eat a pork rib.
Well, yeah, you can, because you're at the top of the heap with power. And you use your power to say, I'll take what I want. The hell with you. It reminds me, somebody told me a joke about a man who got on board a cruise ship, and he had one of the lower berths at the really bottom of the ship. And he took a jackhammer with him, and he started to jackhammer into the floor of his cabin. And he went all the way through to the bottom and made a big hole in the boat. And all the water came in, and the boat sank. And he happened to be sitting in a lifeboat, and someone said to him, what the hell did you think you were doing? And he said, I paid for the cabin. I could do what I want with it. I think that's the same as what we're doing with all the other animals and with the world. It says, yeah, I can. Yeah. Don't tell me what to do. Well, actually, someone had to tap people on the shoulder and say, excuse me, don't treat that human being that way. Excuse me, don't refer to that person that way. Excuse me. And so now we're tapping society on the shoulder, and we're saying, excuse me, but you need to be inclusive. This is not, where you can pick and choose. You relate to certain people, and so you don't want them to be disparaged or harmed or, treated badly, oppressed. Great. But don't just leave it with those you relate to most. The test is, can you extend your thinking to those you might relate to less or even least?
Yeah, Ingrid, a lot of this thinking about speciesism, it also leads back to that infamous phrase of yours that gets that you're off quoted in many publications. And it's when it comes to having a central nervous system and the ability to feel pain, hunger, and thirst, a rat is a pig, as a dog is a boy. Now,
yes, I'm very glad it comes back to that. Yeah, I'm really pleased it does come back to that. We have said that since our inception, and people will say, "Oh, how can you compare a boy to a rat?" Well, it's easy. I mean, just look. None of them wishes to be burned with a cigarette. None of them wishes to have them to be removed from their family. Neither of them wishes to be removed from their family. And you can just show all the similarities. You can show all the exact sameness in them. And so it's not a question of, would you choose between them? Isn't your heart big enough to embrace them all? Because the biological facts are that physically and emotionally, there may be differences, but the commonalities are what's important. You don't want to spend your life saying, well, I'm different from this person because he has a bigger car than I have, or he's more successful in business than I am, or he's a different color. I mean, this is all rubbish. What we need to do is keep looking for, I am an animal. We are all animals. We're all in this together, or we should be. And so, differentiating between us is not helpful. Finding the commonalities, the similarities, and the sameness is what counts in life.
And one of the things that is similar is that we, as you point out in that phrase so brilliantly, is that we all feel. We all, especially we feel pain. And that is something that where we can stand together, as opposed to, eating each other, I guess.
And we all have emotions. We're all very emotional creatures, even though, some people will say, oh, don't get emotional. Emotions are part of you. And if you want to have a little fun with this, you go to the internet, and there are endless YouTube videos, as you know, of every child or every dog deserves a child, I think is one of them. And it's these little vignettes, these little clips that people have put together of dogs playing with babies and toddlers. And you can see that even though the dog is probably only several months or a year older than the baby, the dog is trying to amuse the child and playing peekaboo with the child and playing runner. This takes emotions because the dog wants to play with the baby and have fun, and the baby wants to play with the dog. You have mothers, cow mothers, desperately going after the wagon or the wheelbarrow that's taking their beloved child away, so that we can drink the milk. And they are crying, they're lowing, they will break open a fence. We see this one on the internet of escape artists, and these animals there are two parrots in a cage, and they work hard to open the gate, and they get it open, and one gets out and the gate slams again, and that one does not fly off. She turns around and she works from the outside to raise it again so the other one can get out. And there are so many examples of thought, emotion, affection, and so on. So, absolutely.
So we need to recognize this, and once we do, we can end speciesism. We can move toward that ideal. Or is this is the long slog here, right? This is the ultimate. We're still fighting racism. We're still fighting genderism and sexism.
Yep.
How long will it? This is like the biggest windmill to tilt against, right?
Well, I'm not sure, because I think what you find, and perhaps it's me with wishful thinking, is that people who get that there's something wrong with speciesism probably get more than others who haven't got that far, that there's something wrong with all the other isms that we have been plagued with throughout society. And to me, it is one big boiling pot, is that we should be against all discrimination, all of these exploitive behaviors and habits, and many of them are just habits. You grow up thinking or saying or doing something, and somebody has to come along and jog you a bit and say, what are you doing? What are you saying? And so I think we're there, and it helps everyone, I believe, to have an overriding sense of what we're combating. I don't think that we'll ever have an end to wars and greed and people doing bad things to each other and people doing stupid things and people having an undeveloped mirror neuron, the ability to empathize with others. People will abuse children probably forever. And so I don't see it as you get one right and then you move on to the next and the next. It's that we want to look at the entirety of human compunction to be discriminatory and say, let's stop this. Let's stop it at all levels, not just at this little level or that level or whatever it is.
Well, it really is a test of your ethical being. And as it's pointed out in the website, if you've ever eaten dairy cheese while wearing a Sea Shepherd T-shirt, right, and you see that the orcas are one thing, but you still, have dairy, or say, I respect the animals, but I'm a pescatarian. I'm not a vegetarian. I'm a pescatarian. This is for people who catch themselves in that inconsistency, I guess, right? They get that moment and then they say, well, maybe I need to consider going all the way.
Well, it's funny because, the thing that used to, at least, and probably still does, get thrown at people who are protesting, even the circus or something, is, what are your shoes made of? And my friend will say, well, I don't eat my shoes. But, it does. For some people, if it's their first protest at, say, a slaughterhouse, and someone says, well, what are your shoes made of? It may be the first time that they've even thought about it because they grew up buying those shoes. And then that allows them to think, good grief, yes, you're right. That's not consistent. I don't believe, though, Emil, that when people say, oh, well, you shouldn't be bothered, really, that's what they're saying, to do this because you're not pure. You'll never be pure, and so don't bother. I'm not a vegetarian, and therefore, because we're all learning and chipping away. And right. I always say nobody's born the Buddha. Even the Buddha wasn't the Buddha. So we're all trying. We need to be trying.
Well, Ingrid, I appreciate you taking the time. I have to say that these are gradual things. Like I used to wear suits that were made of wool, and now I seek it. The polyester has gotten so good, I seek out polyester now.
That's great.
And no merino socks or merino T-shirts or anything like that. We know how bad merino wool is. And now with the clothing, it's so simple because it seems the world is going toward that, toward trying to make sure that we can be on that good path. So
it used to be a little bit tougher, and now it's easy as pie. Every morning I look at the news, and this morning it was Tesla. Its new model is going to be 100% vegan leather, no cow leather, and you just think hooray, because 8 cows or more used to go into a leather interior. But all these things are happening. Every 5 minutes a company stops. And the thing is, it's only because consumers are feeling their oats. They're exerting their pressure. They're exercising their consumer purse power. And so we have to speak up. We can never be silent. We have to move the market in the way that we want to move it. And most importantly, we have to open other people's eyes to what's going on so that they can be part of this world of decency, because that's all it is.
PETA President Ingrid Newkirk on taking the next step to change society's human supremacist worldview by ending speciesism. Read more about speciesism and the fight against it, and take action at PETA.org. And that's our program for today. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or on ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog, or AMOK.com, or you can find me anywhere. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And thanks for listening. Join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.